It's always interactive, and it's always an opportunity for us to present, frank thoughts and perspectives. The good thing again about all of this is that we are not ignorant, and we are not incorrigible. Okay, we share our thoughts, we share our opinion, but we rely on our experts to guide us aright, because what we are doing here is very simple. We're changing lives one at a time, and we're setting the tone for future generations such that as people find their way to the new world where they live, North America, Canada, or wherever they are, they're able to live the good life and able to be light, as it were, to the darkness in the world. And one of the darkness that we've seen in the world is the vice of domestic violence in our communities. And we are saying, no, Black is not dark, right? Black is beautiful. So we want the African communities, we want the African families to live together in peace, with love, and raise children and raise young men and women alike that are heroes and can exemplify some of these virtues that we seek. And yeah, we're getting there. Good morning, everyone, and welcome once again. Temitope Olukunle is my name. I'm going to be hosting this program this morning, and it promises to be an exciting time, as we've always, had in the past. To introduce myself, I'm a mobile mortgage manager with Savos Credit Union. That's what I do for a living. Ask me anything about, mortgage home financing, North America, Canada, then yeah, I will be more than happy to. But beyond that, I'm an active community volunteer, which is why you're finding me on this space. I'm an advocate for the New to Canada community because I know the vulnerabilities of that space. So I do quite a number of things in that area, offering free airport pickups. So from arrival, they have somebody to talk to, and we connect them to resources they need, like Ruth House and so many other support agencies. Why? Because we want to make sure that right from the time they land, they have those resources at their fingertips, and they can get well settled. The settlement resources I provide is free. You don't have to pay for it. So if you have anyone coming, to Canada, anytime coming to Calgary, Alberta, any of the cities, just let them reach out. We have a network of resources all over this place that can help them settle in and live a good life. And that's part of the contribution to some of these discussions that we're having this morning. Among other areas where I actually volunteer, I recently took up the position of the Vice President of the Hedry Black community as well. And I'll be running, being in that position for another 2 years, among other things that I'm working on and I'm doing. And also we have very wonderful speakers here this morning. I would like to acknowledge the work of the team at Ruth House. They are the organizers of this program. It's been wonderful. We've had this for months, and it's never been a dull moment. I can see some of our regular attendees. Daddy Freeze, you're welcome. Or Daddy Freeze's son, you're welcome. You're always here. Thank you. I think I could see Alaji Ojetola. Mr. Claire, you're welcome again. Thank you for joining us. Adekomi, thank you. And so many wonderful people that have always been a part of this program. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Just so you know, if you're attending for the very first time, you might be wondering what's going on here. This is a safe haven for us to talk as brothers, as men. Okay, so nobody's going to judge you. You're free to share your thoughts. We're here to learn from each other, and we will make, the most of this moment. 3 things I want you to keep your mind on as we talk about this, as we go into this session. 1, we're here to learn, we're here to relearn, and we're here to unlearn. So please keep an open mind, and you will get the best out of this. One thing we are encouraging you to do is to, you can change your name, please, because we are streaming this live, and you can remain anonymous on this program. Please, that's one thing we would encourage you to. That's fine if you don't want, for privacy reasons, if that's okay by you. This morning, we will be talking about overcoming domestic violence, stereotypes, and social stigma in the African community. I know that it's a lot, different moving parts packed into one. And I believe we have, experts in the house that will be doing justice to this. Mr. Bayo Gumbote is here, and Ga is also joining us on the call this morning. Good morning, welcome.
Thank you very much, Demi.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Ga. We're happy to have you as well.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think Dr. Julius is not here yet. So, but we will start.
Yeah, tell me, just a moment. Dr. Julius, he has an emergency, so he will not be able to join us this morning.
Beautiful. So, yeah, our hearts and thoughts and prayers, is with him, and we believe that we have rock solid, resource persons here to do justice to this, even in the absence of just Dr. Julius. So, without further ado, just to lay a ground rule. Yeah, I can see someone saying I'm a woman. Can I stay? Elvis, what do you think? I mean, we're not going to.
Yeah, no. Basically, like the forum is for men. I don't think like she can be on the forum. I just wanted to text the person privately before you just said it. So if the person can log off, then that would be nice.
Yeah, because this is meant to be a men's forum where we
it's a men's forum. Women have their own forum that takes place every Thursday.
So yes. Elvis, you'll be doing justice today. Elvis will reach out to you, Helen, and we will.
Yes,
we'll take care of that aspect.
Sorry, Helen.
No, that's fine. And I don't know if there's any other person here that is joining for the first time. Please.
Sorry, I have an observation here.
Okay, sir.
My observation on Elvis. Sorry about this, but you can decide. I saw somebody in the chat and was asking, and already responded that she says she's a woman. And she said, oh, can she stay? And I said, why not? But if you already have maybe, of course, I don't really know much about, the spread of the scope of this particular meeting here. From experience, in social work and also in domestic violence, we're talking about men for sure. Of course, it's a public, thing we're doing here. Whether we like it or not, if you're talking about a man, the woman in the house also has a role to play. Some of the things will come to play by the time we're talking about this, when you ask those questions. But if already you guys have something that, you already have for women and you think that they shouldn't be here, I'm okay with that. But it's also let you know that there's no violence that happens, in isolation.
True.
Violence happens, like between a man and a woman, between a man and a man, between a woman, husband and wife and children, all those things they're intertwined. So if we're providing education, we need to also spread it out. They also have a role to play. How can a woman help a man also? And how can a woman, so that before they get to violence stage, things can be normal. But like I said, if you guys already have something set, that you feel that women, should not be here, please.
Yeah.
No, thank you for that perspective.
Yes, Pastor Bayo, thank you very much.
Yeah.
We run this program is being run on the gender line. We have like a mom-to-moms program. We also have like a sisterhood program that we may come together to share the same thing that we are doing here. So, and we are in the future, we are looking to match, like we have a program that is for both men and women. So for now, we just want to keep it like on, as we have been doing it like since for a long time now, just like a safe space for men to be able to share their thoughts and ideas, So just for now.
Okay. Elvis, just to provide a quick perspective here, I think we have a message from Ruth out saying we should allow the women stay and join the program today if they are here. So, yeah, this is a men's program, but like Mr. Bayo already said, please allow them to we crave your indulgence. Let them stay, let them join us today, and let's learn together. But of course, we're going to introduce them to the sisterhood program that happens every Wednesday so that they can also be a part of that one, okay? So please, yeah, I just got that message. And again, Mr. Bayo, you will agree with me that, like I said earlier, it's an open conversation, it's an open forum.
It is.
We're here to learn, right? And the beautiful thing, again, I've learned over time from the testimonies that people have shared on this program is we've had situations where people have done things wrong in the past. And people came to the program, they learned a thing or two, and they came back to tell us that, you know what, my wife doesn't have a problem anymore. I now understand better, right? So those are the kind of testimonies. So here we are here to learn, we're open-minded, and we will continue to do so. I understand that we have a researcher on the call joining us. Please, when it's time, if you'd like to contribute, we will allow you as well. Serge, you're acknowledged, and please, when it's time, you feel free, you join the conversation as well. Good morning and welcome, everyone. Please feel free to ask your questions in the chat so that we can maximize the time. I know we often spill out, past 11 o'clock in the morning because of the various questions that we have. So please, I'm going to stop the introduction at this point. Ask your questions on the chat, feel free, and all these questions will be taken care of one at a time as we go through all of this. Once again, I'm going to allow our speakers or our resource persons to introduce themselves. We want to get to know you. We've talked too much about ourselves, Ruth House, and what we do. So let's hear you. Over to you, Mr. Gar.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm just so honored to be here today, and it's a great privilege to come and to have a space where you can find opportunities of this safe space and environment to not only share, but to listen to ideas and share back. And there's no doubt that this is a most needed space where men can come in and share different aspects. And it becomes a little village where also you have this drum. And I remember every night in back home that there's a little stories time that you come and seem to learn. You don't know what does it mean, and as you grow, you start seeing the aspects of it. So I just want to give a huge thank you first to Root House for allowing and creating this safe space. And no doubt that this is something that it will be needed. And as those conversations were coming through, I think it becomes an inclusive. And one thing I can gather here is the interest to actually see the solutions that are on the table, but knowing that the solutions start with the root cause and the foundation as a bedrock. My name is Gargar. I am a family of 5, and I usually say, I got the invisible hair that I just started being here, but those are my inner and every bit of the things that gets me up in the morning. And I have an amazing partner, Nancy, who we met when I was 18 and she was 17. And within the first year, it becomes just the introduction to Canadian integration. So we came as a family-sponsored refugees. And soon enough, the first year, I became to know as one of the at-risk kids at the age of 17 in Canada, and trying to navigate the system, trying to navigate the new cultures and try to fit in. And it's just that aspects of always dying to fit in. And now that changed once I met my lovely wife. That becomes a great partner, and changing it to say, why not changing it to living to fit in, and always trying to have a hope and optimism every now and then. And from there, I started the youth advocacy, seeing the barriers that comes through. But also this conversations mean so much to me as a person that was raised all the time. I said I was lucky enough to have all the women at my leadership that time. My dad they passed away when I was 12 years old. And since then, my single mom raised me, tried to bring me up. And I think it's a miracle where all the leaders that were in my life actually were women, from my managers, from the people that my mentors. And I always lack that opportunity to say, I wish I can find a man that I can look up to, that I can see. Because in the past, I had my dad that gave us every bit, but it becomes the struggle that living through his words and actually embedding those words to become who I am. But people who took me through were all my mom, my daughters now, and I had this opportunities also to have 3 sons. So now just living up to and trying to be the best dad that I can. I got into educational background. I came and took accounting, but I turned out to be, I'm not an accountant. I can't sit down. So as soon as I I first got introduced to become the student president at Forest State College. And from there, that's where I learned advocacy, where we used to advocate on federal level, provincial level, and municipal level. And it used to be incorporating, especially one of the success was the mental health and the student mental health. And it becomes to play a focal point, because as we start moving beyond the state borders and student, we find mental health becoming a bigger issue even after the COVID and now post-COVID, that everybody's struggling with those pressures. I moved up from there. I was so lucky enough also to work for the government caucus, the UCP caucus, and the majority government of Alberta. So I had the time there to work on the outreach position and do what I do best, which is reaching the community and working on the grassroots. And also prior to that, I founded the Youth Empowerment and Skill Center, and just realizing that a lot of youth were at risk and they do not have where to go. So that growing for the past 10 years, and we became one of the first Black-run youth organizations in Alberta, and seeing to be one of the Black youth-run organizations and actually funded by the Black community gives that opportunities to find a way to say, where could we create role models or create a roadmap where those youth or those young men can find an opportunity to thrive and not just to think about surviving. I then took a role also with the city of Calgary that to focus on the community mobilization and grassroots. So apart from this, on the volunteering side, we try to pick up every now and then and to create the community. The one thing I could highlight for sure is, how do I go back every day? And when my kids ask me, what did you do today, to have a response that can help elevate their time. That's what I remember from my dad, that always says, you could create something from nothing. And that's something that kept me going until now. And I hope that's something that I would like to share with other young men, with other youth, and with my sons and daughters, and to have to just be a best as I can, to be a best father for them and a best husband to my dear partner, Nancy.
Thank you so very much. There are lots to learn from you, and we thank you for those wonderful things you're doing in the community. Like I said, we're here changing lives one at a time. Mr. Bayo Gumbote, you're welcome this morning, and please, we would like to meet you and know a little bit about you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, David, for this wonderful job you're doing here. Can you guys hear me loud?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and so my name is Bayo. My last name is Gumbote. And I moved to Canada in 2009. That's about 14 years ago. I'm married, wife, and 2 children. And on this call, I can see 2 people who are part of my life in Canada. So it's interesting to see 2 people here today on this call. One of them was the first person that actually introduced me to social work in Canada. Mm-hmm. That's Ben Banjoko. So he's also here on this call. The other person also is Abiola Oseni. Abiola Oseni took me when I was coming from Nigeria. I landed in his house for a month before I now rented my own house. Isn't that great to see people who are part of your life in the last maybe 15 or 16 years and are still together? Absolutely. I'm grateful for all these people who have been part of my life. So I have a social work background and also community development background for over 30 years. So I worked in Nigeria for about 20 years for the government of Lagos State, doing community development, and move on to international development as well. When I moved to Canada, I was looking for something close, that can help me to also make myself relevant in the community. So I met Ben Banjoko in a homeless shelter. He was working there. A support worker and a social work student training. So I asked him about social work. So he told me about social work. And I went into social work in University of Calgary. So University of Calgary, I got 2 degrees from University of Calgary in 3 years. Bachelor of Social Work and Master of Social Work. So I specialized in the mainstream social work and community development. That was my area of social work. And then since I moved to Canada, I've worked in a couple of nonprofit agencies, COPS, Mustard Seed. My last role as a social worker was working for the government of Alberta as a social worker in child protection. So I work in First Nation community in a community called Stolen Nakoda Child and Family Services somewhere in Morley. If you are going, west before you get to before you get to Canmore or you get to Banff. So that was my last social work I did. And then right now I have, other caps on my head right now. So right now I'm into financial services. So I run a business in financial services. And part of the cap I also wear in communities that I also, pastor a church somewhere in Chestermere, not too far away from Calgary here. And so that's just what I can say about myself right now. I'm also a volunteer in the community. I've been volunteering now for the past 10 years or maybe 11 years or so. There's an agency called, SafeLink Alberta. They used to be called ACE Calgary before. So I've been volunteering for them in so many capacities, putting things together for them in program design, and every other thing like that. So when I was told about this particular, opportunity to come and share some of the things I've done in the area of domestic violence, I'm also a researcher from the University of Calgary. So I do research about men, actually. So I do some research about men. Before violence happens, how do we help men? When I was finishing my graduate school from the University of Calgary, that was a project. I'm going to also share part of that particular report with you guys here today, if that will be helpful to let you see. So I do research, social research from the university. I do other things as well too, but that's just a brief of what I can tell you. I've also been, in sessions where I do relationship, and domestic violence, what do you call it now? Counseling for men who are abusing their partners and women who are also abusing their partners in psychosocial interaction within Canada and also in Calgary here. So that's who I am right now, Mr. Timmy.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bayo, for that wonderful introduction, and lots to learn from you. And we'll be looking forward to hearing, about the research that you did and how we can, and tell us what you found about us, right?
Sure.
And that's I know that's one of the reasons why, we had said, okay, we want this to be a men-only thing so that people can talk freely. I mean, in the past sessions, right, there were frank, opinions and, discussions that came about that I know some people may not be willing to share if they thought like a woman was on the call. So that's part of the sentiments why, okay, we're saying, oh, it's a men-only thing, but I mean, women are also welcome, but we'll still talk and learn, all the same. This morning, we're talking about overcoming domestic violence stereotypes and social stigmas in the community. And I know there are many parts to this, but we're going to try to start, simple. We want to start from the simple. Let's start from the foundation and continue to build from there. Mr. Bayo, we before we start talking about overcoming, these things, right? Let's even understand what are we getting into. I did a bit of a digging, and of course, there are different stereotypes around, domestic violence and all this, things we're talking about, which is totally understandable. And one of it would be that, okay, domestic violence only, happens from men. Okay, and that's one of the touchy topics that we've had in the past on this call, where, someone even told us, I know you're always blaming the man. Meanwhile, lots of people on the call told us, yeah, but this is what we're seeing from our wives too. But nobody believes, right? Because the man is always deemed to be stronger. So maybe, Mr. Bayo, let's even understand, what are these domestic violence stereotypes that we have in our community? Like I mentioned, one of it that it's very common is that male are the perpetrators and female are the victims. That's one of the stereotypes you're going to find in the community. Again, there's this stereotype that the victim will always be believed, right? So once you're a victim of, once you go to the community, they just believe that, yeah, that's happening, to you. And there's also this stereotype that when you leave, right, when the abuse will stop when the victim leaves. Okay, those are some of the, and there are lots of them. There are lots of them. Can you help us shed a bit more light on some of what exactly are these stereotypes, that we often see, so that we start building from there and even understand, okay, so how do we now overcome these things? Let's start from the foundation. What are the stereotypes in your work of research, and how can we best understand them, even the ones that are very subtle? Okay, not everything is pronounced, right? We want to understand these things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Timmy. So the first thing we really want to understand first is, what are stereotypes? Maybe a simple definition for those who are not like maybe, in the same field that we work. So stereotypes, from some of the definition I put down here, says are characteristics that society instinctively attributes to a group of people to classify them according to maybe their age, according to their weights, according to their occupation, their skin color, gender, or whatever it is. So those are stereotypes. Like you say, truck drivers are fat. Aboriginal people are lazy. Men are just always, the cause of, violence all the time. So those are stereotypes that the society has placed, especially when it comes to domestic violence on men. Like I already mentioned to you, violence is, a thing that happens between, partners. There are so many things we can talk about domestic violence here, but because of our time and then the things that we have to focus on, we're looking at the stereotypes and also the stigma as well. We're talking about stigma. So stigma are things like, when you say somebody has a mental health issue and you label that person and say, this guy is crazy guy. This guy is very incompetent. It's crazy. When in actual science, there are things that we can do differently than labeling this particular person. So those are stigmas that we normally, come around. Like I mentioned to you earlier, in my work, I used to work for a company called YMCA in Calgary. So what did I do? I do what they call a psychosocial relationship, sessions with women who are abusing their partners and men who are also abusing their partners too. And I hear different perspectives. So coming back here to tell us and say that it's only men who, are usually perpetrators and women are probably the victims. We need to demystify that in the sense that everyone is involved. And that's why I said that too. Before violence happens, usually we'll find out from men and say, what can we do? What can we help them to be able to do before they get to that particular? So people are challenged. They come here, especially with Black men, they come here with a lot of expectations and say that, this is Canada. This is how things, should be done. And this is what my expectation is. But when they come in here, things change completely. This is a man who had been income before. All of a sudden, you don't realize that, the income is not what it is to be. And the other partner, probably for one reason or the other, has something better. And this thing continues to build up. But what do we actually tell them to do? We tell them to manage, a relationship, because relationship is very key when it comes to living together. People we're not perfect human beings, but we always live together to ensure that we have something that brings us together for the sake of the family. So I give you an example, sometimes one of the relationship meetings I had, or probably sessions I had with a woman, and in that group, the woman, the man was telling me, okay, my wife actually sponsored me. It's an African guy. My wife sponsored me into Canada. And what happens? This man will go to work. The wife will be the one collecting the money. So the money goes to the woman's account. And each time this guy needs money, the wife does not provide money to him. He will tell him, you got to go work more. You're not working enough. I want to give you money to probably just take transportation. And that violence actually builds up. And we said to this particular man, so what did you do? He said, that is the reason why he has come to this particular session to find out what can he do differently, to avoid such things, in the future, and to guard against, being a violent person. And so every time we have an opportunity to meet with, men, especially Black men, we always say and say, look, don't look at what, don't allow your own situation now to lead you to a situation where you see yourself in a place where you don't really like. We always like men sometimes, sometimes, most of the time, we usually don't want to express our, emotion. We don't want to express our feelings to a fellow man, because we believe if I tell Timmy what I'm going through right now, Timmy will go and tell Guy, or Guy will probably go and tell, Ben, and they begin to talk about me. Or somebody sees a man, this man is challenged, with a mental health issue. People say, mental health, this guy is crazy. Those are stereotypes. But in actual science, this particular person can actually get help. I will share with you, like I said, some of the results we had. There's a particular body I belong to called Alberta Men's Network. You can write it down, Alberta Men's Network. If you go on the internet, you will see the research we did in 2015, between July and October 2015. What we found out, number one in that research was the fact that, look, societal expectation of men limits them to be able to access services. What does that mean? So when they see a man enter the shelter, or they see a man probably going to the food bank, and they say, this guy is lazy. Can you imagine that? When natural science, this guy needs help. So we asked men. We went around cities, in Alberta, about 5 or 10 cities. We did a survey and we conducted it. And men told us that, look, the expectation, of the society on them actually limits them to go and probably seek for help. And we said, no, you can't be doing that to yourself. You're hurting yourself. And you're not helping your relationship at all. Because somebody will label you and say, hey, because they see me and say, walk into a clinic and say, I think this guy is sick. What about that? If you are sick, you can get help. Why do you have to stay sick when there are resources for you to be able to use? So that's just what I'm going to put, in the introduction for this particular topic, to let us, expand on that, because I also know that we also have other speakers too who are going to contribute to what we're saying here today. So I'll just probably pause a little bit here.
Thank you so much for that perspective, Mr. Bayo. And Mr. Gar, please, are you able to speak to that as well? Let's learn from you.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that I can moved on into what our brother said is especially with the stereotyping. And even when we come into 3, it's whether on economical, on social, and on cultural aspects. I believe just to add on into the grassroots ideology, or just that perspective of the community or on the society, that, when a man seeks help, shows weakness. And also people that sometimes looked up to as men being a pillar of the house, and sometimes on the tough times being the one that will hold the house, and as though if everything happened, it will collapse. So these expectation builds on, and every time we moved on into different cultures, different societies, or different situations that we are facing, of course, there is sometimes a time that you want to come and breathe in, and that's where all the issues comes into play role. So, for example, even the role of the post-COVID or the COVID-19 when it happened, it adds on into the burden that were already existing. And now you add in the financial aspects. Now you add in the man being looked at as the breadwinner of the house. And every time you're afraid to lose your job, so you have issues dealing with that coming home because you have a family to take care of, and also that perspective also that you cannot lend your hand out. But also, I think it becomes one-way receiver. It looks like every time the man sometimes thinks it's okay because I'm the one who should take all the negativities and observe them, listen to things in life, and becomes more like the counselor in the house or in the society or in the community. But also at some point, these ones becomes, there is no way or point of return, where at that point on the highest mountain where everything collapsed. So we see that when we were dealing with community, in no way I'm an expert, but dealing with the community, we sometimes learn about those issues, and we ask, why is this one's happening, or why is it all of a suddenly going? So I can tell the best example of community members that I see sometimes a wiser person that we looked at as, an elder in the community and the pillar that you go to, and you just love how they come with advices. But sometimes in the next year or coming year, especially during COVID, we find most of those men become homeless. And we were just surprised and we said, no, something is happening. But the more we start learning about them, you start seeing them also facing issues with the domestic problems. And some of them just couldn't handle it. And sometimes there is nowhere to go. And sometimes you see them, the worst person to see when they are at downfall, because the first time we see them in the community as their highest, as the one that actually bring the peace. They are diplomats. They are the wisest people in the house, in the community. And sometimes you get surprised. And that's the stereotyping that we saw also, that people just don't seem to understand. And they say this person used to be the one that actually helped solve our community problems and the one that solve our family's issues and domestics. How do they end up pointing into this downturn? And sometimes when they open up and you see their weakest spot, like you could, and sometimes I find myself even being really bad at it, because I uphold them even on a higher level, to, seeing myself as somebody who's learning from them. And until somebody opens up, that's when we start realizing that I could be vulnerable to, or at some points that you are vulnerable at men, and you tend to push through and saying it's going to be better in another day. Also, the social economics, when a man loses a job, I think that they bring it up as they see it losing all the aspects of living. Now you cannot afford to provide for your family. You cannot, you don't want your family to be kicked out, and you want the best to your family, and also vice versa. When you see your wife sad, you take and observe that. So I just want to segue into what our brother said about especially stereotyping, and that's one thing that we saw quite often, that in one side, without coming and acknowledging to say, like, it's okay that today I have this weakness and we can work through it. So COVID-19 has really, really pushed a lot of issues to an edge, or actually opened the lid, where you see the domestic violence. Previously, also, you see families, both husband and wife working, having things, but now, like with the inflation, the high cost of rising food, the housing, and then on the other shifting skills, you find yourself, you are the first one to lose. So you find the issues with the men, especially in the Black community, you find them all receptive into, like, what will happen if I lost my job and I don't have the safety net, building on paycheck to paycheck. So you start seeing those one coming up. But also a lot of times, anything of those that happen, it doesn't get taken that way. It gets taken into stereotyping, and our brother laid it out very well. Like at some points, we run a food bank, and we see some men are even very hesitant to come and ask. And sometimes we'll go to like the singles house. So we have a couple of singles house that we have to go and talk to them as a brother to brother and saying, like, one day I'll be there. So I have to start, and it's okay to come. And we went to the point of even sometimes delivering the food to them, because they don't want to come, and they're saying, and you could tell sometimes from how somebody will take 10 minutes to explain himself. And we always tell them, it's okay, you don't have to explain yourself. You will get better. This is just a hands up. We know you're going to get back up, and this the life is going to get better. But also the saddest part is, like, you see a lot of domestic issues that extend beyond that.
Thank you so much for that wonderful. But just a very quick question, because I'm hearing you and I'm hearing Mr. Bayo, and my question to you, and you can jump at it. There's no sequence to this. So are we saying, or from your body of research and the works you've been doing, are we saying this incident of domestic violence, is it more prevalent in the Black and the BIPOC communities? Is that what we're seeing? Or is it just a stereotype again, that this is what happens in the Black community, like predominantly? Is that the case?
Let me go quickly on this one here, because so domestic violence, is a global stuff. It's not only, peculiar to the Black community. So even whatever it is that we can think about, we have, we live in a Western world. So Caucasians are here, other ethno-cultural groups are also here in Canada. So it's not only peculiar about the Black community. So the Black community, sometimes people look at us and say, oh, like we said, we're talking about stereotypes also here. We're talking about stereotypes. A white man, or probably, of course, when you just say maybe a Caucasian who probably, also if it's a domestic violence situation, will probably learn how to say, let me seek help quickly because I know that this is just going to help me. But for us in the Black community, we still need to do a lot of, learning, education, advocacy in such a way that we can begin to bring it back to people and let them know that, look, you are not alone in this particular journey. So even though people have labeled you and say, oh, you are this, you are that, you cannot do this, you cannot do that, because of maybe, like I said, I get a definition for stereotypes about your age, about your color, about your race, about your occupation, or probably employment you won't find yourself. I was talking to a young man, of course, as a man also in North America here, is looking for a job, but at some point in time, because of his color, somebody was asking him and say, oh, are you from Africa? Can you imagine somebody who wants to offer you an employment? Oh, we're not looking for any African guy here. We're looking for somebody from Southeast Asia. So we're looking for Southeast Asia. So that alone is enough to put that man down if he's not strong enough to say, what would have happened to me? So do I have to go and change my identity to say, oh, I want to be a East Asian person overnight? But if somebody like that can just come back and say, oh, I think whoever is saying that has their own opinion about myself, but me as a person, I think that will not limit me from probably sourcing, for other places where I can get employment. So domestic violence in its own way is not only, like peculiar to the Black race here. People are involved. And I've done a couple of, like I told you, which I'm going to also share here. Some of the research tells us, we talk to, Black men, we talk to, the Filipino guy, we talk to people from Southeast Asia about their experiences, in the area of relationship, talk it before violence actually happens. What do we need to do? What are the experiences that they can share with us? So DV, I can mention in just short way of saying domestic violence, is something that is, national, is global. And what in the African community, all we need to do is to provide more resources, more education for people just to know that there are resources that can help them, which I'm also going to share with you, maybe in my next talk, if you allow me to be able to do that. That's all I can say about that.
Thank you so much for that, perspective. And we're happy to learn from both of you. And please, everyone, you're welcome once again. If you're joining us midway into the program, feel free to post your questions. Feel free to post your questions on the group and we will get to it. We'll answer your questions. This is a safe space for men and brothers, especially in the African community, to speak up their mind, ask questions, and we can learn from each other. Please keep in mind, the goal of this session is not to separate families. That's not the goal of this session. Ruth House is all about ensuring that families come together and are bonded together. And that's why you always hear from Ruth House preaching and advocating for early crisis resolution before it snowballs into a bigger problem and you start calling the police and people beating up each other. That's when Ruth House wants to step in and resolve these issues, because I see comments about, oh, do we want to create problems in the family so that we can get funding? Far from it. And I can tell from stories I've heard from families here, saying, oh, we've resolved our issues and everybody is happy with each other. Those are the kind of stories we want to hear. And that's what the Brotherhood session is all about. We're not here to separate families, but we want to resolve issues before the snowball into problem. My question, that there is a question that came in the channel. I'll just quickly ask so that as we go, as we go along, we'll get into the other aspect of this session. So I hear, Mr. Bayer talk about, it's a general syndrome. It's not peculiar to the, Black community alone. But my question, follow-up question, and maybe you and Mr. Gar can also, chime in on this. So why is it that African men are targeted as abusers? Why is it? Because, someone here on this call thinks we are targeted. What do you think about this? Are we really targeted? And why is it that we are, especially African men, and when I mean African men, I talk in a general sense of BIPOC now, okay? Why are we targeted as abusers? Mr. Gar, do you want to go then? Mr. Bayo,
yeah. Absolutely. So just going back to our brothers when he says, definitely, I think domestic violence is something that epidemic. So in a sense, if we look into the starts, but now every time it looks like it's parallel with an issues as well. So when we had pandemics, there was a lot of reports of domestic violence. And I think it's looking into now the issues, that's where it varies. So for example, when we look at the issues of the pandemic, maybe people can say, because now families are coming together, there's more time, there's more issues. So it's a way that you are now in together, you're sharing problems after problems. There is the financial issues, there is the pandemic issues. But also what we found out, it's looking now and dropping it down. And based on just the grassroots observation, and once again, is not research, but you tend to see that correlation, it's existed already with this with the African or the Black community. Like the bedrocks of that family, it's always sticking together. So like we were just talking with my family, and we said, in back home, like there is nothing, but we still have the breakfast is always a thing. Dinner and lunch is always a thing, but we took it as getting together. Like you cannot eat separate. Also, like in South Sudan, the best example is like the food has to be put into this steel circle, and everybody comes together and eat there. So during that eating, there's always jokes, there's always things, and that's where the families collaborate. Also with the woman's side, like when they're doing, there are things that the women get together, and there are things that the men get together. So it was surprising to see that correlation when it comes to the COVID. You're like, that's something that we do actually would makes us closer and better together, because that's part of our culture. The second one is tough times build resiliencies based on the refugees and coming from war turns and stuff, that every time you see something that will take your family member life or something, the man steps in to protect and to try to say, I'm going to go out, you're not. So best example, when there's a war, a lot of men sometimes say, I'm going to go buy stuff just in case. I don't want my family something to happen. So those are the things that I start looking at. It's like, that's something that doesn't make any, and that's where the differentiation comes in when we talked about economics. Sometimes because you have, when you have the same paycheck to paycheck paying the bills, and you cannot even hold the families, you are in surviving mode, and you're not even thriving. And I think that's where the first issues comes in when we look at immigrants and when we look at the Black community. And then you have that insecurity when you see the job now that reduce the hours. So I used to find some people that used to work in warehouses that when COVID hit, they didn't care about getting COVID or having issues. They were scared that if even losing one day not going to work, that could basically jeopardize them on paying bills. And so those are the issues that we'll see coming to play a role. And also when you are talking about the low incomes and then seeing how many people from the Black community falls into the low incomes. So that's one of the various factors that I consider. Definitely, I think that plays a huge role on the domestics issues, because if there's families, the roof is not on the top, you're losing the aspects. Another thing that I can generalize also first before jumping into it is also the resources. And in particularly here, a lot of the Black community that I talk to, they have that pride, and especially coming from background of people that looked up to. And when they are facing domestics, if there's an issue and anyone involved and one person has to leave a house and that man left the house, they, even though if they have their relatives and stuff, they don't choose to go to their relatives. They will say, I better go on the street, I better find it on my own. And sometimes it's hard to ask. So back to that stereotyping that kicks in right now as a weakness. So on the other side, the Black community, the Black man is looked at as this tall, 6 feet guy, tough guy, that will and I think it tailored into physical always, not into intellectual. So when somebody sees me, they will see 6'3" in conversations. Like if Garth opened his hand, probably will hurt someone, and through the actions that comes in, and they're like, no, Gar is just a big teddy bear. Like it's actually just a cool guy. Like what will make you go right away into like him hurting someone? And I think that's something that we are giving that physical appearance, but also it becomes a threat in the sense that I have to work so much to showcase why I'm not a threat. And I think that plays a huge role in domestic violence. And you talked about it when it comes to the believing or not. Domestic violence is a tricky problem once again, because a lot of people like once again, the women's can be becoming the victims of domestic violence and the men. But when it comes to play, when it comes to be the man who is the victim of the domestic violence, for the Black community, is hard to talk about it. Also, on the point of pride, to come to say, I am being abused by my wife. And people will be like, come on, like there is cultures, there is this, but also that's the actual threat. We find out that the cultures were facing away. So when I came in 2005, I found a lot of families, and I think you alluded to it, that the objective of the root house is not really dividing the families, but finding the fundamental cause of the root causes of the issues and to try to solve them. That used to be existing in the cultures when they came here, because they used to there is like a ways, there was to be someone in the community that will come and say, you know what, let's find out the healing process. And I could allude to it closer to indigenous community, where they have that restorative, finding the root causes before they get out of hand, before physical. Somehow, somewhere in that conversation, there was signs that it has turned to domestics. And now brother said, like, as point of, that man, his money was getting taken. He was asked, like, go back, here is your. So those are signs. But sometimes back in the days, there used to be someone that they can go to, and we see that facing away. And when also we came closer to pandemic, it even moved up. So the more you find, even the people who were looked at as the wiser, as the educators, becomes the victims, or becomes having those problems, there's nowhere to go. And especially on the education side and awareness, because of the cultures, if somebody is born here, they have more knowledge of like what is the cultures of the Western looks like, and toward domestic violence, what is it, why is it wrong. And when you are coming as a new Canadian, I think there is a fear always that, I'm coming here for a new life. But when you start hearing the stories and issues and you see things are happening, it's shifted that mindset. So that by itself becomes, if you go to our communities and you talk to the different of freedom, like you will see people talking about freedom even being a bad thing. And because they're like, this is the experience of the freedom. But also, I think if there is education and awareness, like where are the what does freedom means? What does domestics means? I think it will have a huge. So the Black community is at a huge disadvantage because of that. because of also coming, you are running, you have the running mode, you have the surviving mode if you are coming from war. And also as an immigrant, you are coming with different classes. So those one will definitely separate when we come and looked at the domestic violence. Where you started is like people who are running. If you are running a marathon and, and everybody's running, but you are told, you are waiting for the gun, for the siren to start, and you see those one, you have more likely will have tough time catching up with those people. And that's where the Black communities are, whether sometimes due to the social economics or, I was the first person to be the first in my family to get education out of the first generation. And I only got it here in Canada. So like now I have a lot of burden in me to even see that what does education look like. And I do not know a lot about domestic violence, but the community looks at me that Gar now knows a lot. So whatever he says have weight in a sense. And we becomes more like researchers in the community. And we are put into that role, but we are actually just the same who are path and finding. So that's what I can add into our brothers, that at some point there is a lot of differentiations that will come when we look into the Black communities. And just to sum it up in short, I think definitely our physical appearance have played a big role. I was in an election and I put up my sign. And I was laughing because of the result after, because the guy came and just teared it apart like a paper. And something just told me I was so tired that day. And I was just like, go right ahead, do it, man. And I just took a video. And a lot of people like came back and they're like, holy cow, like this dude could have hit this guy and knock him out. I was like, why would you jump into hitting? He did something wrong, but it doesn't mean it has to be physical always. But I think that mindset's needed also an educational and a cultural perspective to learn in our community. So I'm so glad that Ruth House have that foundation and moving on into start connecting the communities together.
Thank you so much for that wonderful thought. I mean, that's loaded. It's a lengthy one. And yeah, I can see some hands raised already. People are having questions. And on the back of that, just very quickly, and because of our time, I crave our indulgence. I know, again, as usual, we might spill a little bit past 11, but we'll try to make it as short as possible so that we can answer every question. Mr. Bayo, on the back of what Mr. Gar just said, we talked about why is it that, men are targeted, right? African men are targeted. And of course, somebody said in the chat that because the agencies don't speak up, okay? Because the agencies don't speak up. So I'm going to bundle this, and I want you to help us do justice to it, Mr. Bayo, along maybe other things you would like to share with us this morning. So we talked about why is it that men are targeted. Someone said because agencies don't speak up. Is it true that agencies don't speak up? When you're answering that, we want you to speak to this. Is it true that agencies don't speak up? And is it the responsibility of the agencies alone to speak up, right? I can tell from my experience in the past 2 weeks, I heard of a story, and this is a life story, where a young man actually picked the phone and reached out to people in the community to say, hey, my wife is actually beating me up, that kind of situation. And everybody reached out to the wife to say, hey, what's going on? And in fairness, she actually honed up to it, right? So we're seeing men speaking up. So is it the responsibility of the agencies to speak up? What's the role of the men also speaking up about these things and making the community aware that this is what is going on and it can be dealt with before it results into breaking the home? And in addition to that, you're going to also help us answer if it is true that women, so someone asked the question that they want to know why is it that women have more help than men, and how can men get help in a struggling family situation, please. I know it's a lot we are putting on you, but please, we need your help here.
Okay, I'll try and take that one after the order. This looks is loaded. I don't know if I have the privilege to be able to share my screen, Timmy, to show some few things is possible.
Yeah, sure, you can. You can do that, yeah.
And first thing I also want to also say is that if you look at the charts, there's a guy by name Serge. He says I'm disabled. Maybe you can just help me to do. So he said I'm disabled.
Elvis, can you help us with that? We would need Mr. Bayo to be able to share.
Yeah, I just need an access to be able to share some things here.
Okay.
It's still disabled actually. So why is trying to do that? So if you look at this particular chart that somebody posted here, so Serge, I think is a researcher, and one of the things he posted here is talking about the statistics about, men's, the domestic violence that we have among, so the number of male and female intimate partner violence victims in Canada by province in 2019. In that statistics, if you look at Alberta, in Alberta, we have that we have over 11,000 women who have reported, intimate partner violence. How many men reported? Only 3,000 men in that statistics that was reported. I'm not sure, maybe I can go back and see if I can be able to share that again.
I think I will encourage everyone to just click on the link and also see the, okay, yeah.
Can you guys see?
Yes, we can see your screen now.
Beautiful. I have that particular link I just clicked on right now. So what does this particular number actually tells you? If you look at it here in Alberta, saying that we have 3,188 men who have reported partner violence and female 11,000. In what year? In 2019. Just to come back and say that, is it the responsibility of the agencies, that they are not reporting about, issues that affect men when it comes to domestic violence? The first thing I would say is that this thing has to start, from you and I. You and I have a role to play in this domestic violence, with men, especially African men, before domestic violence happens. How many men have you engaged in your own circle of influence? So I have a circle of influence. I have friends, I have co-workers, how many resources have you actually shared with them, especially for those who are coming new here, to Canada? And they come in here, and like I said, different things happen here. The way they think they live in Nigeria, they will live in Sudan or in Kenya, it's not the same way here. There are things you need to pay attention to. There are certain things you need to pay attention to. So that information sharing actually starts with you and I, who are close to these people. I give you an example. I have a friend who has been here even before me. This friend of mine had an issue with the wife. And the day the thing happened, the wife called the police on him. And he came to me and said, "Oh, can I come to your house and sleep?" I said, "What's going on, bro?" I said, "Oh, my wife called the police on me and is asking me to move. The police said I should move. I don't have any place to go to." I felt somehow, not only that he came to me as a friend, he also knows that, oh, this guy's a social worker, maybe. And I felt that there was a gap between me and him in that area of relationship, that I assumed, that, oh, this guy was here before me, he should know, but he doesn't know. So how do I get him to know? It's me that will start that conversation with my fellow friend, with my fellow coworker, with a family member, and say that, look, these are things you need to pay attention to. You don't shout on not even on the woman. You don't shout on the other person. It's regarded as an abuse. There are things you need to probably, seek and understand protocols here when you come in here. Those are things, simple things that can cause, that can lead or generate into abuse. Are the things you and I, as maybe family or friends, that we can actually start with. There are very simple things. What about the agencies? Do we have enough agencies working with men? Probably not, maybe. But do we have enough agencies probably working with the men and children? Of course. If you see One of the things, like I told you, I work, with the provincial government as a case worker. So I go to courts. I represent families in court. I do a lot of things, in child protection. People who are abused, I take, children away from their homes and put them in a place where, they feel safe somehow. But what we're saying here is that the agency tool, like I said, we need to help agencies spread out that information. And somebody like you here now, Timmy, you are doing a very great job. You're volunteering, putting your time there. How many of us do volunteer? Ijoma is here. Adebola, I know Adebola Kasum, if it's the same professor I know from the University of Calgary. Adebola Kasum is here. Adekomi is also here. What are you doing? How many people have you talked to in the last 6 months, in the last 1 year? They are new people. We need to connect to these people and let them know, look, it's a good thing to be here. But at the same time, there are few things you need to pay attention to when you come to a country like this in Canada. Let me share with you some of the things that I told you I was going to share with you about my work in the area of domestic violence. And I'm going to put my name and my number on the chart here. By the time I finish this, I want you to go to where you go to Alberta Men's Network. So I'm going to click on here, Alberta Men's Network. So that's the agency, or probably the research I told you I was involved in, that we did what they call a developmental evaluation in that. Are you guys seeing my screen here? Okay.
Yes, we can.
You guys have seen my screen here. If you look at this particular research here, so this research actually, if you look at it here, I mean, I'm just going to give you a little bit, some of the things that came up in that particular research. So was done, Alberta Men's Network, and these are the agencies that were involved from the University of Calgary and the agency that actually sponsored. But the most important thing, probably want to point you out as some of the key findings that came from that particular report. Like I said, what I did in that research was to do what they call a developmental evaluation. That was my role in that research. So what I did in that research, I was able to do a lot of work with other communities and other other ethno-cultural communities to interview and say, what do you see or what do you have to say? And some of these things, like I said, this is a report. So this report tells us, like those we interviewed, and look at here, one of the things we found out that in financial circumstances, so to better understand men's financial circumstances, respondents were asked to subjectively comment on their financial well-being rather than report their annual income. So look at what people said here. How do you promote well-being? What is the response? Barriers, to well-being of a man. So we also talk about support and services. Look at what people said here. He said, in this survey, almost all men, 96%, reported that men do not need support and services. So almost all men reported that men do need support and services for well-being. Because we always think I said, oh, no, men don't need it. Just to come back to that question to say that, look, we need a lot of, information and services to help men get help that they need. 96% responded that men actually need help. And what are some of the support and services that men will use? Look at it here. This is what we call about peer support. You and I have a role to play here. Like I started with that, saying that, look, what are you doing in your own community, in your own circle of influence? They need counseling, healthy role model. Find a particular mentor, somebody, a role model that you can relate with. What about financial mentoring and information? Share with men, just like Guy said here. Sometimes men think, oh, I lost my job, everything is gone. What do I need to do? Instead of you to go and seek for help, that results into violence. Understand that there are support services. What about skill building workshop where you can go and learn about few things that can help you to be able to see things in a different way? So I tell people that, look, of course, the agencies are doing their own job, but do we have enough working with men? Probably not. But is there anything we can do? Definitely yes. Part of what we can do is information sharing, awareness, education. These are things that can help us to be able to bring that numbers down, because it's not in our interest to see that families are disunited. Yesterday, I saw somebody posted to me, somebody I've been mentoring for some time now. He lives in the States, in Texas. He sent me a picture because himself and the wife, are separated. They are separated. So they do what they call a shared custody. Unfortunately, of course, something happened. When the children were with the wife, something happened, maybe neglect, or so, of course, neglect, I would say. This child went and took in, an iron nut, a bolt. She swallowed it. The guy sent me that thing yesterday. Like, it tore my heart to say, why do we have to get to that level? What can we do before we get to a situation where, oh, I cannot live with you anymore? I can't just take it. You are this, you are that. There are things we can do, as healthy men, to be able to help our partners, to also help us before violence actually happens. And the other question also will be, maybe, if I'm wrong, please just correct me. You are asking and say, of course, sorry, can you remind me of that last one question again?
I think we talked about men getting resources.
Yeah.
Women have more resources and help than men.
Okay. Yeah. So about resources, that's great. There are so many agencies, couple of agencies that are working with men that you and I can look at and take opportunity and just, so we have a bucket here that says resources that men can use, in our toolkits. We have a toolkit here. So the toolkit will give you an idea to say, where are these resources that men can also use just to get themselves some help that they need. Look at some of the services we had in that. So the support, like I said, that men will need is also here. And then what it means to be a man. Just so look at here, additional resources. So program from Calgary launch, special, migration program from the Edmonton launch event. So I'm looking at something that gives me an opportunity. Like I said, I can't go through all this particular one, but like I said, I'll put my number here and I'll put my name here for you to be able to see. But I can tell you there are quite a number of resources that we can use. May not be enough right now, but the fact is that it has changed from what it used to be with all the things that are happening, between servicing agencies, families, and also the community that we represent here.
Thank you so much for that wonderful perspective. It's time to hear from the audience. We have quite a number of people with their hands raised. I know initially Pastor Ben had his hands, but is now down. But I'll quickly go to Daddy Freeze's son. Thank you for your patience. We want to hear from you. It's not just all talk from us. So please, Daddy Freeze, can you unmute yourself and let's hear your thoughts. Hello, Daddy Freeze's son. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Yeah, I heard all what the speaker said. That's really awesome. It's good, and I can say that Ruth House or a forum like this is not actually interested in family breakups. That's not what we are. And from the background of where we come from, we don't even believe in that. So from where I come from, my background, we don't believe in breakups. So I don't think they are here to do breakups. So the issue of saying maybe there is no enough resources for men, it's still, I kind of think it's still like a kind of a belief or something like stereotype too. So because if you look out there, there is always support for even the men. It's just that, just like what the speaker said, the men doesn't go out. We always feel we don't want to be seen as the weaker gender or something that we can do it. So, and that's why, in our opinion, we always think the resource or support is not there. But quick one, what I just wanted to say again is this. And the DV, the domestic violence we are talking about, the root cause of it is simply, if we look at the whole thing, why it is popular among the immigrants, among people coming to Canada, is because the culture change, and then too, just like what the man said, that we like focusing on some points, on some areas where it's two-way thing here. It's not only the man. And I always say it, instead of getting to a point where you now need to start raising hand or making it violent, I understand this side of the world is not like Africa. It's not like, okay, let me just say from my culture, I have other means, other resources where I can ordinarily tap into free, and that will give me what I'm lacking at home. So instead of allowing me to generate into violence, I would rather access those free support. But I think in Canada or North America, we don't have that. And that's what I always try to carve out for myself. Nobody is going to tell you this is what you need to do, but once you are seeing that it's leading to a situation where it's going to become violence or something, just try to remember how it is being done back in wherever you are. Because back home, most of everybody that comes here, I don't think the DV element is part, because if you are that type, I don't think Canada will even allow you to come. You may have record or somewhere, even back home too, that you are likely going to physically abuse others, and they won't give you. So you don't do it there. So remember, what do men do there that they are not doing here, or they are finding hard to access here, now leading to violence? If you feel you need to talk to, and such some kind of situation is coming up, call your friend. Timmy says something that is always there. His service is free. Call him. Just talk to somebody. Leave. The pressure here is, oh, everybody needs to pay bill or something. So the avenue to even do that is not there. In back home, only one job. I only do one job. Yeah, but now here in Canada, I'm doing 3 jobs. So where's the time to even go and start assessing all that? So those are the kind of things that are responsible for all those. But like I keep saying, there is resources there. Just find one mentor or two, maybe in Ruth's house, talk to them. If you feel the house is becoming tense, leave, just go away somewhere and talk to some people, then relax and come back. You don't need to really make it look like, oh, you have to raise. We don't need to generate to that level. That and lastly, so that I allow other people to talk, I always believe in multiple options. Like, just I know, don't get one job in this side of the world. It's not working. I have tried it. Once that job goes away, there's this form of frustration that comes in within me, that being a man, I'm not earning any income again. Even this EI, they say, oh, go on EI. EI won't, still not going to give me enough. So there's this kind of frustration. So I always advise, at least get one full-time and one part-time job somewhere. I have network of friends, people, mentor that you can call. You, in this side of the world, this mentality of I'm the man, you have to, no, it's not going to work. It's not. Just let free be, go after freedom for your wife. You to enjoy that freedom. I don't need to like say, oh, I want to see what my wife is doing and wherever it's going or something, or he has to do this. If he doesn't want to do it, I will do it. My hand is there. It's even good that you do it. So don't, this idea of, oh, I'm the one in charge, or I'm the one making the money, I'm the one deciding, is not going to work. It's not. If you want that, then I will always advise men, go back to maybe to Africa or something. I can do that, flex it, maybe if you want, not this side of the world, because everybody work hand in hand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daddy Freeze's son, for that wonderful perspective. It's always, beautiful having you all the time. And yeah, we heard what he said. We don't have to degenerate to violence. Seek help and talk to someone. That's a starting point. Someone asked a question in the chat saying, what is the first thing a man should do if you're receiving abuse from your spouse? I have always learned this: talk to someone. And I'm going to allow Mr. Bayo to also speak to that later. But please, you keep that question for us. You address it. What's the first thing a man should do? I believe speaking to someone is always the first step. And I mean, speaking to the right people, not just someone, okay? That's very important as well. And in response to some of the things I've seen in the chat as well, I'm just going to quickly mention this. Next, I'll be going to Serge for his comment as well, his or her comments. But one thing I want to encourage us on this call this morning, like we always do every other week when we meet, I believe there is very little we can do sometimes about other people's bad behavior than to be correct ourselves. As men, and this is a frank and open, opinion of mine, and I can be wrong, I'm happy to be corrected, but I think sometimes we are so invested in correcting other people and making sure other people do the right things than we are invested in doing the right things ourselves, right? We want the best of things from our partners, but we don't want them to tell us the things we're doing wrong, right? And sometimes when they do, we become a bit, on the hedge, and we think, okay, she's challenging me, and those kind of. So I will just say, relationships are meant to be complementary. We are there to help each other, like Daddy Freeze's son said. There are times we need to open up and be vulnerable as men. We need our women to help us. We need our partners to help us, and there are times we need to also step up and help them, right? That way we'll be able to make things work in a reasonable manner. And again, like I said, resources are there for us to reach out to. So please, let's take advantage of that. Serge, please, you can unmute yourself and let's hear your thoughts.
Thanks. I will be quick. I really enjoy the conversations here, and thanks for the work that you are doing. I just want to elaborate on what you said, that like the right people. So we usually talk about men are violent, but we also, one of the stereotypes that I think we also heard in that is that we forget that there are those men who are not violent, and who are actually are many in number than those who are violent. And maybe if they could come out and share how they do that, how they resist to violence, that what Bayo and others are doing here, I think that's already a resource. We talked about agencies, but I think the community that is here, talking to someone, that's really a great resource, and also culturally appropriate from where we come from. I wanted to contribute to two quick stereotypes that I also find that when we talk about people are violent, I think I come from a perspective where I believe that the person is not the problem, but the problem is the problem. And there's a time that violence comes into the life of a man or a woman or whoever, and there is also a time that violence is not there. So I'm really interested in my work and research in those ways. I think some of them have been mentioned here, like the pressures that are out there, the transitions, the immigration, the cultural norms, and those societal forces that are pressuring on people, and then people take that in and bring that into their homes, but they can be separated from the violence. And the other stereotype that I'm also working around is about children and young people that are exposed to that violence, that I think we never talk about. We don't talk about much. Yet research and statistics show that men and women who grow up experiencing domestic violence in their homes, I mean, witnessing or seeing their parents responding with violence, so they take that in and they grow up thinking that the solution to any conflict. So I think that's also something to maybe to also externalize and speak about if we want also the men of the tomorrow and the women of tomorrow also be free from violence. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Those are wonderful part. And Elvis, I'm sure we're taking notes. We want to also, share among ourselves what's the impact of this domestic violence on children and other people in the home that are witnessing it. And yeah, it's something that we really need to talk about and look into. Thank you once again. And very quickly, Ejikeme, can you take it from here and let's hear your thoughts? Hello, Ejikeme. Are you there? Ejikeme, you can unmute yourself and let's hear you. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Ejikeme Lekwa is my name, and the English people who could not pronounce that name call me Darlington. It's up to them. Yeah. So that's where I catch them. So I have an accent. I say, okay, pronounce my name, and you can't. I said, now you have the accent, not me. Well, I have listened through the discussion, and I made some notes, and I found out that we actually mentioned quite a number of factors that could lead to domestic violence. I know because of the constraint of time, we're not able to go deep into some of those topics raised. Something like cultural issues and freedom, financial matters, jobs and pressure of work and so on. We talked about so many other things, including some kind of peer pressure and change of environment and so on. One thing I want to say upfront is that Africa does not promote domestic violence. I want that to get clear because it appears that Africa promotes domestic violence, especially when you say that people could go back to Africa if they don't want to live the way these people here live. Now, there's something I have noticed. If we come to North America, we have not come for them to assimilate our culture. Now, if you look at Chinese communities and you look at Indian communities, do you know that their families are a little bit more stable, right? From my own observation, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, for those of you who are social scientists, their families are a little bit more stable. Do you know why? They teach their children their culture and they maintain their culture irrespective of where they find themselves. My father passed on at the age of 107. My mother at 96. I knew them as an adult, and I have never, I'm not exaggerating and I'm not lying. I've never heard my dad shout or yell at my mom, no matter what. I've never seen my dad raise his hand on my mom. So Africa does not promote violence. Now, let me give you one simple example that creates violence apart from finances and the living conditions and so on when we come to North America. If, for example, you have, or an individual has 5 or 4 children, okay? And they arrive in Canada or in the US, they have only 2 rooms. Where do you keep all the other children? How would you and your wife have the intimacy required to smoothen your emotions? Because these are some areas we avoid to talk about. Let me say it clearly. This is a forum for men. If you do 3 jobs and your wife will do 3 jobs, you don't have time for intimacy. You don't have time for any sexual intercourse at all throughout the month. Sometimes 2 months, 3 months. There will be tension and you to continue to build up. And before you do it, you start lashing it out on yourselves. Whether we accept that or not, that is the truth. We don't have time for intimacies, walk. Not even for vacation, especially those of us from Africa. Some of us don't know where Banff is. We are only busy walking. I mean, there is time to relax. It is not all about money. And if we don't relax, the tension will continue to build. And then all the peer pressures and all the, what do you call it, the gossips and I call them some of these information from radio without battery people, they continue to spread rumor rather than facts. And before you know it, you continue to distance yourselves from each other. And the next thing, you start quarreling. There's no time for intimacy. There's no time to do anything together because both are pursuing money to be able to pay the bills. I'm not saying it is wrong to work. I work harder than so many people. But I also find time to talk to each of my children, to talk to my spouse, and to sit down and laugh and play. I have so many other things to talk about, but I'll have to allow other people to come in. But I want to mention finally that when we change environment, we need to be conscious of our culture. We also need to learn the culture of where we're going into, and then be able to strike a balance between the culture we are coming from and the culture we are living in. There is no culture in the world better than your own culture. Every culture has very beautiful elements, and every culture may also have some downside. The ability of the man to learn and the woman to learn and accept these things will help and go a long way in making for smooth relationships. One more important thing, very, very important. In our various cultures, there are values. Are we able to maintain those values? Don't forget, the fact that the man is the leader of the family cannot be erased anywhere, whether it is in the US or in Canada or in London. It cannot be erased. The only thing there is, we must understand that leadership is not just about power and control. I am an advocate of servant leadership, leading by example. It is not about power and control because you can use threats and control anywhere, but at some point it will no longer work. Those of you who have teenagers, you know that. When your children become teenagers, you can no longer threaten them. You begin to negotiate. You begin to dialogue. Am I right? When they were children, you were like, okay, if you don't do this, I will remove that. They'll go and quickly do it. But when they grow up, when you remove that, what about it? They'll get it somewhere else. So you don't have to sit down and negotiate. You have to sit down and dialogue for them to be able to behave properly. So that's what I have to say. It's not about power and control anymore. It's about negotiation. It's about dialogue.
Thank you so much, Ejikeme, for that wonderful perspective. Lots to learn this morning. Mr. Ben, can you quickly unmute, and in less than a minute or a minute, please, can you share your thoughts?
All right, I'll go straight to the point. As men, we are in a very volatile situation in Canada. And each of us is just one step away from either being sent out of the house or being sent to jail. And the fastest way to get into those corners is domestic violence. Our buttons will be pushed, but we have to do something for ourselves so we don't get there. I've had a relationship with a lot of men that have been sent out of the home for which they are paying mortgage, and they cannot stop paying it. So they will get another house somewhere, paying that and paying the mortgage at the same time. Court could drag for 2 years and they are still on the same spot. Some men would lose their job. Some men will face deportation. The question we have been asking ourselves is, what can we do to not get to that point? Because it's such a very thin line to cross into. Before we even talk to someone, I hear that a lot here. That's the way to go. We need to reach out and talk to people. Before we reach agencies, thank goodness for Ruth's House and other ones that are coming out. before we reach people in our community, the elders who can intervene, and just help us out, we need to first reach out to ourselves. We need to talk to ourselves first and quickly. Sometimes we don't have the time to even think, but if you can just take a pause and think about the implications of if I went this route, what could happen? And I know anger can block us. We don't, when we are angry, we say we have blackout, all right? Or we have red out. Can we please just try to get our eyes open and quickly in a jiffy think about the implications if we went, the violent side? How do we talk to ourselves? How do we reach out to ourselves? We have to determine how we deal with our anger in the moment. All right, so anger management will be very, very important because, of course, we'll be faced with frustration, stress, and all of those things. What do we do in the moment before we get to call somebody like our elder who was supposed to be here tonight or any friend? We have to talk to ourselves. So the first thing we need to do is, if you can get out of that situation right there, they may not want you to go because they will think you're running away. You're not going to come back home. Let's assure them, I just need to get out of here, take a breath, and I'll come back home to face my problem. We also need to understand what can we do in the moment to even feel calm, because at that point we are so charged and anything can happen. Let's learn to breathe in and out. We can even lock ourselves in the room, in the bathroom. Just take a deep breath. Escape, if we can, from that stressful environment. We also need to learn what can we do real quick to calm ourselves down. Part of it is we can, maybe just call a friend, all right? We can call a friend, we can call agency if they're available. But more importantly, we need to talk to ourselves and just decide, I'm not going to go this route. There's everything that is leading me to strike. I won't strike because I don't want to get into the complications. And just whatever it is that works for us as men, as individuals, we know ourselves more than anyone knows us. So what can we do in that moment just to escape? Even if we run away, let's run away and come back and face the problem. Agencies, other people, we follow. We have to take care of ourselves in the moment so we don't strike. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ben. That is loaded. Words of wisdom from our elders. Thank you so much for that wonderful perspective. Before talking to other people, we need to talk to ourselves. And that's true. Again, like I said earlier, there's very little you can do about other people's bad behavior than to be correct yourself. We need to work on ourselves before we start reaching out to others and making sure that they are also in good shape. Thanks for the wonderful opinion and suggestions coming in the group chat. Lastly, the last hand we have is for Pastor Ben Adekugbe, and we would love to hear from you, sir. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to applaud the last two speakers. My brother Ben really hit the nail on the head, and the brother before, Brother Ejikeme, I believe it is, they were powerful. But I just wanted to target something. And it's really this mindset. I've been listening for a little bit, and people keep saying about being targeted, targeted. Listen, if there's a target on your back, then why don't you refuse to be that target? But that's a myth. Men are not targeted. I think it's the mindset that needs to change. I keep hearing things like, oh, we're in Canada. So the implications of saying that we're in Canada means that whatever happens, whatever is frowned upon in Canada is acceptable in the African culture. But that's not the African culture. That's not the African culture. We should move away from this thing about being targeted, because the problem is when you have that mindset of men are being targeted, then you start walking on eggshells and you end up, the thing you're trying to avoid ends up happening to you. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, there's always going to be times where you're going to have arguments. That's why I'm very much in favor with what has been said earlier, particularly the last speaker. that we need to talk to ourselves. We need to have some strategies in which we deal with things. And talking about leadership, that's what leaders do. Leaders, I think the speaker before talked about, one of the speakers talked about servant leadership. That's what leaders do. Leaders don't just react, leaders have to look at the bigger picture. And so what I'm imploring us to do is look at the bigger picture. It is not about, you see, when you make things all about you, that's where we end up in trouble. But we need to understand, when we decided to start a family, it's about the unit. It's not about you. One of the things that would help us the most importantly is, have we asked our spouse, help me understand you? Help me understand your pain. Not justify, not when she tells you, you start explaining away why you did it. You just want to hear somebody. People like to be heard, seen, and be a part of something. But when a woman feels like she's not being a part of it, or she feels like she's being dictated to, and stuff like that, and everything, we always put it down to respect, which is needed. Every man needs respect, don't get me wrong. But we need to begin to look at the mindset. That mindset has to change. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Pastor Ben, for that wonderful contribution. Lots have been said today, and I'm going to give Mr. Bayo and Mr. Guy, if you're still here, like a minute each to just share their closing thoughts. It's been a very wonderful session we've had this morning. You've heard people pour out their minds. We have lots of conversations going on in the group chats, people giving suggestions on what they think should be, the way this DV should be solved, permanently and things like that. But there's a message that came in. It wasn't shared on the group chat. And Mr. Bayo, before you go, we just want you to also quickly talk about this. So somebody says, Hama, I think that's referring to the woman, right? Says I should just keep quiet, like a mumu, like, be docile, so she doesn't send me out of the house. Now it frustrates her because I keep quiet. What would be your thoughts for this individual in this kind of situation? So the woman threatens him to keep quiet, otherwise she's going to send him packing from the house. And now because he keeps quiet, Amma is a man. Okay, Amma is a man, just telling us the story of what's going on. So what would be your advice for this man to do in this kind of situation, please?
Okay, so did you say Amma is a man who posted that?
So Amma is telling us the story. Like,
yeah,
he's being told by the wife to keep quiet, otherwise he's going to be sent packing from the house.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we've shared a number of resources here today from previous speakers, Pastor Ben, Ben Bamijoko and Chikeme. They've all said a wonderful thing, and part of also what we're also going to do about you asked that question for me to ask and say, first thing to do, as a man, when like violence seems to be on the way. Like we already said, number one is, look, if the environment becomes so toxic for you, first thing you want to do, flee first. Just leave that environment. It doesn't matter whatever the environment. Flee first. Even the Bible tells us this. Flee from all appearance of what? Of evil. So domestic violence is also an evil as well. So flee from that first. So once you flee from it, the next thing will be, who can I talk to? Okay, you flee. Probably you also talk to yourself secondly. And third one, who can you also talk to about this particular issue? Of course, like Ben said, the button can be pushed. And when those things are pushed, you think about what are some of the consequences that may arise if I go into this violent situation. Of course, we may end up, losing our jobs. We may end up, in the prison. We may end up, if care is not taken, facing deportation, because we have seen men who kill their partners here. Mm-hmm. Somebody who kills somebody, that's a serious crime. So when you talk to yourself, you come down and ask yourself, what are the consequences of what this can lead to? And I want to encourage you, go to the chat. I've sent about 2 links, one from Alberta Men's Network, the other one from Action Dignity. It's a community, it's a community agency also in Calgary that we can also access, resources about working with men and every other thing. So I'll stop there for God to just finish up.
Okay, all right, thank you so much. Yeah, so the question has been posted properly on the group chat, and and I believe this has been answered. Resources have been shared. Please reach out, and I believe you're going to get all the help that you need. Thank you again, the person that asked that question. And Gar, in 1 minute, please would like to share your thoughts to wrap up all these things that we've discussed this morning.
Yeah, no, just in a simple point, I just want to say I'm truly happy, and just to hear, this is the first time actually since the long time that when we used to stay with our dads just in that men's circle. So this is since growing up to be a father. This is actually the first time to come into the men group and to listen to this. And it is an eye-opening, but once also it is a learning experience where you see other perspective, and sometimes no doubt there's things here that have been said that sometimes you're like, wow, I didn't know this exists, but also sometimes you ask, like, I didn't know that this is something in common. One thing I'll just touch on is back into statistic, for example, when it says for every one man that reported abuse, there is 4 women that reported abuse and being abused. So I think a lot of you, and my brother also mentioned on that statistics, and I think it comes back into that educational and awareness and challenging the perspective. And I think our brother just shared earlier his experience and being and seeking help. I think that's the first one. It's always number one is that person has to stand and seek help and ask somewhere, and sometimes there's those resources. I'm just so moved by the last speakers, and every speaker came in and shared the ideas with different perspective, and looking into how these issues are being domestic issues. Once again, as a man, I didn't hear here today it was me versus my wife or man versus woman. Is the fact that this is something that what are the resources that we can do, how we can help, and here just coming into a safe place. And I think that's something that I took away today, is coming into a safe place, knowing that I can be vulnerable, I can seek help, and I'm here learning and leaving with one thing. I just hope this one will continue, and to continue more going into bases where we can feel that perspective. Now that's even post-COVID, that sometimes we'll even have a physical time where we can come grab a coffee, and this could lead into even getting resources, not toward even just domestics, but how do we empower to overcome things, but also even getting more resources from them here. So I'm just leaving with optimism and meeting my brothers.
Thank you so much for that closing thoughts. I believe we've addressed all the questions. Pastor Ben, you still have your hands raised. We cannot finish this conversation in one session. And I think we already have plans to continue this next month. So I'm craving the indulgence of Mr. Bayo and Mr. Gap. Please, we want you back again next month to continue this. We have questions that we have not addressed. So please, we're going to try and wrap this up at the next call, because we don't want to just bundle things and just do it for the doing sake. No, we want to address those issues, especially those that have questions. We've seen comments about, inciting the House of Commons to make some changes into how these issues are addressed. We've not been able to get into all of that, Mr. Bayo and Mr. Gas. So please, we need to address some of these things, during the next session. Having the children taken away immediately once the police arrive and things like that. So please, we will address all of this during the next call, and also giving room for people to share their thoughts, that we were not able to do today as much as possible. And hopefully, we're going to have the elders of the elders, Dr. Julius, also on the call to also, weigh in, and let's learn from him with over 40 years experience, doing this, right? So thank you, everyone that came in on this call this morning. It's been a wonderful opportunity to learn. I've learned a lot this morning, and I believe all of us have had the same experience. Special thanks to Ruth House for this wonderful opportunity, and that's the reason why we're gathered here. This is Ruth House. Ruth is a feminine name, But again, this is a brotherhood session that we're having. So that should tell us that this is not just about the women, okay? It's all about having both the man and the woman in the right frame of mind, having the right mindset, living together happily and building strong families, especially in the African communities. Thank you, Ruth, for all that you do. Thank you, Elvis, for always, being there, the planning, reaching out and organizing the resource persons. Thank you, Pastor Ben Adekubi and Mama D for the wonderful work. Thank you to everyone at Ruth House for the wonderful job that you're doing. We're seeing the impact, and we hope to have everyone on this call next week or next session, sorry. And please invite your friends, invite your families, post the flyers on your, DP once you get the invite, and we continue to make magic happen in our families. And yeah, thank you once again. And I don't know from Ruth House, do we have any closing thoughts, please?
Yeah. David, thank you very much for facilitating this program. You have always been there. This was very, very good session again from you. And Pastor Bayo, I know that you have other commitments. You were supposed to be here just for an hour, and we are here now for 2 hours. So thank you for sacrificing your time, and for Gaga and for everybody who attended this program. And as you said, we have so much to discuss about this topic because this is a very interesting topic. So we are going to have part 2 of this topic on September 30th, same time. And hopefully we will be able to answer all your questions. So I'll reach out to Pastor Bayo, if at least to sacrifice time again for next session. And I'll also try to see if Dr. Julius can join us. So thank you very much for coming here today. And we hope to see you again next week. Next month.
Thank you, everyone, and have a beautiful day. And let's keep changing lives one at a time.
Thank you, everybody, for having us here today. And we wish you a wonderful weekend. Just take time and look at those resources we have posted. If you have any questions for somebody like me, my name is there. My number is also there. You can reach out to me and we can help as many men as we can. Good to see you, my friend Ga. I'll be in touch.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll see you again very soon again, okay?
Absolutely.
The feedback form is there. Let's complete the feedback form. Let us know the topics that you want us to, talk about next. And yeah, we'll be here for you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.